Former ANC President Thabo Mbeki says the upcoming 55th National Conference of the party in December will be a defining moment for the movement. He says policies that will be discussed must talk to the challenges that are plaguing the country's economy and taking it on a downward trajectory. Mbeki told members of the Strategic Dialogue Group at their annual general meeting in Johannesburg that there are still corrupt individuals in the ANC. He says it will take the movement to act up and deal with them. Abongile Dumako has more.
The ANC's upcoming 55th National Conference and what's likely to come out of it continues to be a point of debate across the country. Former party president Thabo Mbeki says this conference will have to be vigilant with a clear vision that will determine the future of the ANC. He says that the party can't afford to have leaders who are deep in corruption and stealing state resources.
This is possibly a defining event in terms of the future of our country. I think that emphasizes the importance of the matters that Comrade Billy has raised. And I'm quite sure that a part of the reason people would want to see it as possibly a defining event is they must be concerned about what policies must come out of there.
Mbeki says the condition of some of the country's state-owned enterprises is embarrassing and something needs to be done.
If you look at Transnet, just now, Transnet with that strike. If people hadn't understood the strategic place of Transnet in terms of the economy, I think they do now.
The former president says the issue of Phala Farm is not doing any justice for the incumbent Cyril Ramaphosa. Mbeki says people will only be convinced that something is done to deal with state capture through actions. Former ANC President Thabo Mbeki has called on all those delegates who will be attending the 55th National Conference of the ANC to ensure that credible leadership is elected. This to rectify the dented image of the party. Abongile Dumako, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Anthoni van Nieuwkerk is Professor of International Affairs at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. He joins us now to understand some of the comments of the former president. A very good evening to you, Professor. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So as you heard some of that, President Mbeki saying the upcoming 55th National Congress of the party in December will be a defining moment for the movement. Will it be more watershed than Polokwane?
A good evening and thank you for the opportunity. You know, I'm reflecting with the rest of the country on three presentations today by three former presidents. It's pretty unique.
Yeah.
plus the rain that has fallen in Johannesburg. So what a day we have. The one former president is looking back and is angry and bitter. That is Zuma. Well, Kante is driving a very important initiative with members of civil society, academia, the private sector, and so on, to talk about the policy frameworks that the country needs going forward. And then, of course, former President Mbeki spoke at this event that we're talking about now, about what it is that will save the party from ruin going forward. And I'm thinking that out of these three presentations today, the last two, and the combination of the vision and the focus of Motlanthe and Mbeki, we need both, for not only for the party to survive and for stability to be retained in the coming months leading up to the national election, but even more critically, in my view, for the party to find partnerships with non-party members. That is, you know, intellectuals in civil society and in the private sector, to find that balance that we're going to need if indeed we want to address the issues that President Mbeki speaks about. He's right that SOEs are in trouble. He points out Transnet strike. He points out a number of issues. In fact, Zuma did the same thing. But I think President Mbeki is trying to say, if we don't pay sustained attention to recovering the lost policy and implementation space, then it doesn't matter whether the ANC stays together or not in December. Then the country will be in trouble.
So I want to talk about, and it's interesting that you mention the three of them, and we know there was some sort of a relay. There is a common thread in terms of how they were connected, one being a caretaker president amid what was a shocking moment for the country, unexpected politically, and then the one took over from the other, which has resulted in the events that we've seen in the policy landscape over the past 15 years. And we're talking about the current president now, whom former President Thabo Mbeki also mentioned that the alleged scandals around him don't do him justice. But I want to understand all of these moments, reflecting back through the lens of Polokwane, what we're heading to in December. Will it be more watershed, and what would it mean for the country?
Yeah, I see that you're pressing this matter.
It's because I want to understand. We can't deny that Polokwane was a very important turning point in our country.
It was. Yeah, and this forthcoming conference will be. In fact, let me just round off the earlier idea that I had. We were listening to three former presidents, and missing in action is the current president. I was hoping to hear more detail of how the ruling party and the government will implement the recommendations of the Zondo Commission. There was a deadline of today, so as far as I know, and I haven't heard much. And so this is also playing negatively into the image and the stature of the current president. So when comes December, I think what President Mbeki is alerting us is if the party is unable to put together the best possible candidates, people that have the ability to analyze, to anticipate, and to recommend, people who are educated in the art of policy and governance. If the ANC is unable to put those candidates forward, and we end up with slates, and we end up with a competition between the RET forces and the sort of the reformists in the Ramaphosa camp, then I think we're on the way for a hiding. If the criteria for electing the leadership of the ANC by December is about power and influence and not about ability and skill to formulate the best way forward, then President Mbeki is right. Then we're in trouble. And that is his central message. And can I add that I think he's also suggesting that we might run short of finding the best possible candidates. They no longer exist. And I must say, as an academic, when I listened to him, he speaks to my heart and to my head, because it is the job of universities to train the best possible candidates for governance. And we see with him and other commentators that we are lacking in those skills. We are struggling to put together civil servants that are able to do the best.
So I'm going to take your lead and actually continue with this thread that we've been, saying in between these three discussions. We had at the Motlanthe Foundation, the Deputy Treasury or Finance Minister David Masondo speaking about how the external and internal shocks have disturbed the economic plans the government has. And we have President Mbeki who says that the ANC needs to rise up to the occasion with the kind of economic policies that it's tabled at Polokwane. But I want to point out that graft has taken quite a lot of money away from the public purse. So if we're going to say that government is unable to meet the needs of the people, so graft is something that we have to look to, which President Thabo Mbeki mentioned himself. We have former President Thabo Mbeki, Jacob Zuma, accusing the current standing president of corruption and treason.
Yes.
So let's unpack all of that, and of course the timing of these accusations by the former President Jacob Zuma.
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, I listened to some of what he had to say. He used very strong language. And I think there will be consequences if you stand up and say that the current president is corrupt or is guilty of treason. These are very strong statements to make. And I don't want to spend too much time on the Zuma narrative. I think he's angry and bitter and he wants to take us back. This is not what the country needs. This is not leadership. In fact, my concern is the Ramaphosa narrative. I wanted to hear by today what it is the government and the ruling party will do to take the recommendations of Zondo forward. And it's precisely because of the reason that you just mentioned. We have suffered from high levels of corruption. You don't have to say state capture, because then we're in trouble politically with using this kind of language. But there's no denying the fact that corruption has penetrated the civil service and society in general to such an extent that we struggle with keeping the house together. And so this is the answer to the warning that President Mbeki has given us today. If the ANC is already unable by today to say to the nation, here is how we are going to tackle corruption, then it means that December will be in trouble, because we can't find the way forward as a ruling party. And by the way, let me add, many people say that we've learned from this very expensive Zondo Commission, whether you think politically they were okay or not, but enough evidence has been presented for some of us to form the conclusion that high levels of corruption has penetrated and it's eating away at the moral fiber of society. Right. We must take action. There are many remedies that has been put on the table by ANC and non-ANC commentators and analysts and academics. For example, an anti-corruption unit. It can take different forms. And indeed, the state must take a responsibility for leading on this. Okay. The one last comment I want to make, if I have a minute to say this, is maybe the one context that I'm missing out of this very exciting and important discussion on 3 layers or levels today is the impact of the international environment on our ability to hang together as a society facing coming challenges, the over-the-horizon threats, if you want. And I'm speaking very specifically of the NATO-Russia conflict that's playing out in Ukraine, with a consequent, food, energy insecurity, but also a rising cost of living that we see globally, but also importantly in South Africa.
Okay.
So then the question is, if I can put it like this, Motlanthe and his team are trying there in the Drakensberg, I don't know if it's raining there, trying very hard to formulate an economic recovery plan. What if international conditions will prevent us from getting the investment and the support and the rebuilding of society that we so desperately need?
Okay, Professor, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I can assure you it's something that we are going to speak about. In fact, in just a moment when we return with Dr. Azar Jameen. Much appreciated your time and your insights. Anthoni van Nieuwkerk, Professor of International Affairs at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. So let's take a quick break. We're back in just a moment.